episode number 196 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast.
My guest today is Katie Dewhurt. Katie is the founder and CEO of Hello Balance, a health and wellness company that helps women optimize their health through food. Katie came into her functional medicine profession because she herself struggled with food. This also led her to learn the science of blood sugar balance. Katie's prenatal program has been recommended by celebrity physician Dr. Mark Hyman, Bossbabe, and Girlboss. Katie is also an expert in managing blood sugar spikes, and she has written an actionable nutritional guide and cookbook, the Hello Balance Guide and Cookbook, which has over 95 blood sugar balancing recipes, 5 key fat burning tips, meal building formulas, tips to naturally balance your hormones, intermittent fasting, and much more to help women live their best healthy life. Her health coaching approach is based on the latest science and is not about restriction, diets, or rigid lifestyles, but about eating more of the right foods, which don't have to be boring, to heal and balance the body from the inside out. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. So welcome to the podcast, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure, I'd love for you to share your story. I know your story started out personal, on your own journey, just discovering food and learning about it, and then eventually going back to school and studying. So I'd love for you to share your background with the listeners.
Yeah, so my background is in functional medicine and female health. So I'm really helping my clients optimize their fertility, really figure out what's going on and what root cause we can start to really take that root cause approach. And if there's any anchors kind of dragging them down in their fertility or their pregnancy, that's really, making it harder for them to get pregnant or harder for them on their health journey. But to take it back, it did start personal for me. I was an athlete and I was always really interested in nutrition. Once I was done playing college sports, I was like, what am I supposed to be eating? How am I supposed to keep my energy up? I really started to dive into the science of blood sugar balance. And that really intrigued me because I felt like I had this key of like this unlock moment for me of really understanding what my body needs from a biological perspective. And that to me was so tangible. And I felt like I really could keep my energy up all day. If I wanted to lose weight, I could hit those goals. For me, I was always really interested in, body composition, being an athlete. And I was always worried, once you're done playing the sport, I've seen it happen so many times where it's just really easy to continue on that same path of what you're normally eating. And then you kind of can pack on the weight. And I was worried that would happen to me, but understanding blood sugar balance really helped me. And then I went back to school. I started studying functional medicine and female nutrition. And then I started my health coaching practice in Singapore. And through that, I just started getting so many clients coming to me with fertility issues or just trying to optimize their fertility, or they're coming to me pregnant and wondering what they're supposed to be eating. And there is just so many misconceptions online and in this industry that really the science doesn't back up. So it's really my passion to deep dive into that science and start to help my clients figure out what's that root cause and how can we start to help optimize your health, because fertility health really means big picture, like your optimal health. We're thinking big picture. Yeah. Fertility really, you can only reproduce if you're a healthy person. So it really does come back to your overall health, and what we would do to optimize your overall health is also optimizing your fertility. So it makes me super excited to dive into nutrition and how that can play a big role.
Oh, big time. Actually, you bring up a really good point, because it really is about optimizing your health in general. And it's, yes, you could really focus on fertility, but really it comes down to overall health. That's really what it always comes down to, because the reproductive health is a reflection of your overall health. So it really comes down to that.
100%.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
another thing that I thought about is just the fact that like hormones come into play with everything for women when it comes to weight, when it comes to really like so many things.
exactly. Yeah. And I've seen this time and time again with my clients in my practice is once we start to optimize your overall health, a lot of fertility issues go away. And we
Yeah.
see that in the research too.
Hmm.
And it's just one of those things that if there's an underlying infection, a gut issue, a thyroid issue, a big nutrient deficiency, a lot of stress and inflammation in the body, fertility and reproduction is on the back burner. And that is not what your body will prioritize doing
Correct. Yeah.
if those other fires need to be put out. So I'm really looking at, okay, is there any fires we need to put out?
Hmm.
Let's look at the first steps, getting your lab work done, looking at that, getting that big picture. And then how can we optimize further to support a really healthy pregnancy? Because now we know we can influence brain development and we can influence your future baby's metabolic health, their genetic health, their everything in utero. So,
Yeah.
and even before pregnancy, which is so exciting as we're learning, 3 to 4 months before, a lot of the genetic expression is already happening on the egg and sperm side. So, that's also something that's in our control that can feel really exciting to start to learn about when you're in this journey.
Absolutely. So let's talk about egg health, because that's a big topic, and it's something that a lot of people going through IVF, they realize like, oh wow, like I need to work on my egg health. You don't really see it until they have it in a lab and see how it fertilizes, and so a lot of times people don't think about it, and now of late that's become a big topic.
Totally. Yeah. It's a big misconception that chromosomal errors are, an aging in your eggs that you can't actually modify that. It
Hmm.
is a modifiable risk factor, chromosomal errors, and we can improve egg quality.
Right.
And we're seeing that in the research, but a lot of doctors might not be talking to you about that. And then you're putting so much money into IVF
Hmm.
or you're trying all these different protocols when really diet and lifestyle are going to be the biggest impactors over any other medical intervention on egg health.
Yeah.
Your eggs respond
Absolutely.
very well to diet and lifestyle and different things you can implement, whether it's your nutrition, exercise, going maybe more Chinese medicine route too, herbs, acupuncture, things you can do. And we have so many tools available to us now, which is very helpful.
Absolutely. And one of the things too that I find when a person's first going on this journey and then they're going to an IVF doctor, they've tried to get pregnant, it hasn't worked naturally, and they're like, time is not on your side. Let's do this. And what I always say is give it 3 months, you're much better off, because it's not like your numbers are just gonna drop off a cliff.
Yep.
And you're giving yourself those 3 months to prepare, because then you'd be wasting more money and more time if you're not prepared physically.
That's the same exact thing I tell my clients as well is at least 3 months of a very high quality prenatal vitamin, looking at decreasing any inflammatory stress that is in your life. So whether that's pulling back on alcohol and making sure you're sleeping really well, making sure you're moving your body, and then even looking at what's going on your skin. So different, that research is really starting to develop and we're starting to understand a lot more about different things that can disrupt our ovulation, our hormones, and can influence egg quality just based on things that we put on our skin and that we're coming
Hmm.
into contact with. So I always like to use the approach of if we know we have 3 months to really optimize, then we can go all in and we can do a lot in that 3 months. But if you're thinking of having kids in the next year and you have time on your side, you can always just start to make little changes as you go. So whether that's getting a water purifier, a filter, or it's just switching up your cleaning products to a bit cleaner, less toxic product. It's just little things that you can start to do to really optimize your fertility.
Yeah, for sure. And also another thing that I see is sometimes people go on message boards and then they see these fad diets. And the thing with fad diets is that it could work for a certain percentage of people because it just fits their body type and also just what their body needs. And then they can rave about it. But if it's like not good, it's like not everything's good for everybody.
Exactly. And that's why I love functional medicine so much, because it's really looking at your unique biology. And the first thing that I recommend if anyone's on a fertility journey is to get blood work done, because what you need is different than what your sister needs and someone else needs. And it really is dependent on so many different confounding variables. So I would say the only way we can really make strong recommendations is if we see blood work. I can't just tell everyone that you need vitamin D. In general, most people are going to need vitamin D pretty much, but not everyone, and you really do need to dive under the hood and see what's going on in your unique physiology and biology.
So what type of blood work do you mean? Because I know that if they go to the regular doctor, you mean more functional based?
Yeah, one lab that I really like and that any doctor can order, and you can ask your doctor to order this for you, is the Genova NutriEval. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but it's very comprehensive. And the reason I like it is it's telling you all of your normal markers that you would get in your regular blood work, but it goes a bit above and beyond, and it actually looks at, is there any heavy metals in the blood? So do we have some sort of toxicity that we might want to do some sort of detox and pull out of your body before you get pregnant? It's also going to just give you a better understanding of your omegas. So that's a big one for pregnancy.
That's great.
Yeah. And we know that having the correct ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is really beneficial for decreasing inflammation, therefore improving egg quality, improving your fertility. But also when you're pregnant, then it's also going to be very beneficial for your baby's brain development.
Yes, which is key. I think that sometimes the focus is so much on just getting pregnant, getting that positive pregnancy stick. And ultimately, it's about the healthy baby.
Yeah, it is. And I think that going into a fertility journey with maybe some hiccups and some things that you have to work through, it doesn't feel good when you're going through it, but in the long run, you are learning so much more than the women that don't have to go through this and they don't have to dive into this. I mean, for me, I'm actually on my own fertility journey right now. And I think it's really a beautiful thing to learn about all of this science, because then you can start to go into your pregnancy really prepared. And there's so many times that I see women do get pregnant and then we're trying to correct once they're pregnant. But if you can correct things ahead of pregnancy, you're ahead of the curve. And that's exciting because that really does have lifelong implications on your baby's future health and success.
Absolutely. And let's talk about heavy metals, because I know that a lot of times when people do have a lot of heavy metals or toxicity, it's kind of like a fine line, because you don't want to overdo and over circulate some of these toxins before getting pregnant. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I would probably do it at least a few months before you even start trying to conceive, because you're right. A lot of these heavy metals are stored in our cells and in our tissues. And if you go through some sort of detox protocol, you don't want to be exposing the baby to a lot of toxins in your blood, because that's how it's going to start detoxing out of your body. So definitely before pregnancy, it's not safe to do these detoxes during pregnancy, and I wouldn't recommend it. Once you're pregnant, I would just recommend really limiting and reducing any certain exposures. So whether that's just looking at what type of fish you're eating, or making sure with your baby's nursery you're using the correct type of paint, and we're not drinking, there's just like we're drinking filtered water, things like that. Those are the things that once you're pregnant, you can start to limit your overall exposure.
Yeah, totally. Because it is like this fine line, and I know there's so many different perspectives on it. And sometimes people do like heavy detox, which could really deplete the person, and you also don't want to do that. So there's so many different perspectives and approaches. But for sure, I would agree a couple of months before.
A lot of times it's not necessary because the body is really good at detoxing.
Yeah.
So if you just start to reduce your exposure and you can start to figure out, oh, that's why lead is high or mercury is high. If you figure out what the exposure is, then you get that out of your life. Your body will start to naturally detox itself because our bodies are amazing and they have that capability.
Without a doubt. And I think part of it's really encouraging its own detox pathways. So like encouraging the liver to function better and eating lots of fiber, helping the detoxification through the colon. And I know that sometimes when you have too much coffee, you're kind of getting in the way because the liver detoxifies caffeine. So you're kind of getting in the way of or bogging it down with other work. And that's one of the great reasons why we should, especially when people have estrogen dominance, cut back caffeine.
100%. I totally agree with that. And I think it's helpful to start cutting back on caffeine before conception, because once you're pregnant, we don't want to overdo it with the caffeine either.
Yeah.
And then even during breastfeeding, one thing that can be really helpful is cutting back your caffeine during that period as well, because the baby metabolizes caffeine so much slower than you do. And it can be disruptive to their sleep. Even though there's only a small transfer through the breast milk, it still could possibly affect the baby in that way and mess with their circadian rhythm. And plus, during, the first few months after giving birth, you really want to focus on rebuilding your nutrient stores, sleeping when the baby sleeps, and making sure that you're feeling really great as well.
Without a doubt. So what's a good amount? I know they say 200 milligrams max if people really have a hard time getting rid of caffeine. I personally like green tea as an alternative just because it has so many antioxidants and it's not quite as strong, and it has L-theanine. And what's your take on it? Like if somebody's really addicted to coffee?
Yeah, so I would want to work on that with them as soon as we can. And I'm all about taking baby steps. So we always taper back slowly, whether that's caffeine or sugar or alcohol. Obviously, I'm talking about before pregnancy.
Yeah.
But, we always try to take those baby steps and taper back as slowly as we can. So whether that's doing 3/4 cup caffeinated and then a little bit of decaf in there, and we're just slowly readjusting your body and getting it used to getting off the caffeine and not being so dependent on it. And then also just looking for replacements. So I think it's really helpful for people to have healthy replacement beverages. So if they're looking for that afternoon pick me up, one of my favorite things to do is sparkling water with a tablespoon or two of apple cider vinegar. Super refreshing, kind of tastes like kombucha. And you do get a little bit of spark, but it's not giving you that big caffeine load.
Yeah, for sure. And now I wanted to talk about sugar because I know that that's like a big thing for you and it can impact a lot of people who are struggling with fertility, insulin resistant PCOS. So I'd love to get your take on that and like what people should consider.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of clients with PCOS. I've had a lot of clients go into pregnancy with prediabetes. And I have to say, it responds so well to diet again. So, and lifestyle. So for PCOS, just even putting on some muscle mass, using those muscles, such a great intervention. And I hate when I have a client come to me who's been reading on the internet or been scared by their doctor that it's going to be hard for them to get pregnant. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So we can make little changes, and definitely pulling back on the sugar and reducing the sugar content is really going to help. And my approach to nutrition during pregnancy is really looking at something that and fertility that's blood sugar friendly. So that means adding enough protein, adding enough healthy fat, adding enough fiber. And fiber comes in, it comes packaged in carbohydrates. So you're going to get some of that carbohydrate content, but you're going to get hopefully whole carbs. So that's kind of what I try to gear my clients towards, is how can we start replacing the processed and refined sugars with whole foods, fruit, vegetables, legumes, the dairy. That's going to be all fertility, nutrient dense superfoods, because those foods are also going to have so many more of the vitamins and minerals that you need to support your ovulation, your egg health, and conception.
Let's break it down, because I know a lot of people here like stay away from simple carbs, stay away from simple sugars. Like, why is it important to have the sugars packaged in a way that includes the fiber that's a little bit more complex for the body to digest? If you could break it down in layman's terms, because I do find that when people hear the reasoning, it makes more sense. We know it's not good, but like a lot of people don't know why.
Exactly. And look, like one cookie or one, say, I don't know, maybe juice, for example. Juice is just sugar with no fiber. It's watery sugar.
Right.
And so that is going to spike our blood sugar really high. That every once in a while, I'm not too concerned about. But chronically over time, what happens is that big spike in blood sugar releases a lot of insulin in our bodies. And our cells, when we have so much insulin day to day, meal to meal, snack to snack, is what happens is our cells become really resistant to insulin signals, which can lead to PCOS and prediabetes, and your body just being more inflamed overall. So it's not a good situation for pregnancy and fertility to be on a blood sugar roller coaster where we're spiking our blood sugar really high at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So for me, and the other thing is with a lot of those things that are going to spike our blood sugar is they're not really nutrient dense foods.
Right.
Bread and pasta on their own, they're not adding a ton of nutrients to our diet. They're so fun to eat, but we really need to start pairing that stuff with enough protein, enough healthy fat, and enough fiber, because that's all going to slow the digestion of and the breakdown of the sugar. So if you pair it with enough protein, enough healthy fat, enough fiber, you're going to release less insulin.
Right.
That is a good thing, because
Yeah.
insulin is something that we want to keep balanced and managed. We don't want to have excess insulin lingering in our bloodstreams hours after we've eaten. That would not be healthy for us or our babies.
Right. So coupling it. So even having fruits and having it with like nuts or, healthy
Yes.
fats, like in combination and not alone, is easier for the body to take without those spikes.
Yes, 100%. And this is a conversation I have a lot with my course members in the first trimester, when they're kind of like, all I can eat is crackers or bread. That's all that sounds good. I'm so nauseous. And so for me, it's all about, okay, how can we can we put a tablespoon of almond butter on that toast? Can we, have something that's adding a bit of protein and healthy fat and fiber to your plate? And that is going to have major benefits to your blood sugar. And it's also going to have compounding benefits, because sugar is a double-sided sword, if you will, because the more you eat it, the more you crave it.
It's true.
And so we kind of have to stop that cycle,
Yeah.
if you will. And a lot of people don't realize that they're on that cycle, but having a sweet tooth. What does that mean? It means you're on this cycle, and we have to nip that in the bud and figure out a solution and a strategy that's going to work for you so you're not feeling like you're fighting yourself not to eat sugar all day or grab more coffee in the afternoon because you're crashing.
Right. Totally. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that feeling is not going to be forever. It feels like it's going to be forever, which is why people don't even try to stop in the first place, because they're like, I can't live like this.
It's 2 weeks for most of my clients. So you're going to feel worse before you get better for 2 weeks, depending on how strong that sugar addiction is. If you can get past 2 weeks and you can commit to a full month, by the end of the month, you're going to start feeling like a normal human being, and you're probably going to feel a lot better because you're going to have more energy and you're kind of resetting your dopamine balance, which is also going to help with anxiety, depression, mood, irritability, energy levels. So it has net positives, and it's just about kind of figuring out a really good strategy to get through those first 2 weeks of switching. You know, if we're having sugary granola in the morning, how do we switch that over to a fiber fueled hot oat where it's made with chia and flax, and we're putting some blueberries? Blueberries still give you that sweet feeling, but they're still wrapped naturally in fiber, how nature wants us to eat it.
Right.
Also, a ton of antioxidants, great for egg quality. So blueberries are fertility superfood. Or, you know, an egg scramble, but we have to start with breakfast and look at that first, because if you start with something sugary in the morning, or even too high carb with not enough of the other components we were talking about, then it's very hard to autocorrect in the afternoon.
Yeah, totally. Something that I was going to mention, because we talked about crackers, is there are great almond crackers.
Yeah.
That would be like it's a good dry snack, so that if they feel nauseous, they can have something like that and then have almonds in there as well.
Yep. I love Simple Mills. They're making it more accessible to everyone. And there's Hue Kitchen, which is even a little bit more elevated. Also a great brand to look for.
Awesome. And then what should people look for in prenatals?
Yeah. So prenatals, you would want to start taking, like you were saying, 3 months before you even start trying to get pregnant, because you're building that nutrient bank ahead of time. And you're also going through the methylation process, which is genetically programming the egg, the sperm. So all that is happening 3 to 4 months before you get pregnant. So that's when I recommend starting your prenatal, is before you even start trying. There's a few brands I like that are high dose, functional dosage. So based on the research, what is an optimal dosage? We still don't know a lot about what is happening during pregnancy, how much we need, what's optimal. But I will say there's a lot of prenatals that are totally cutting corners, and they're just not good quality. So this is one place where you do want to invest, and it's 100% worth it because it's your insurance policy. So on the days where maybe you didn't have the most nutrient dense diet, you can add those. You have that prenatal backing you up, making sure you're at least getting enough folate, you're at least getting enough vitamin D. So the brands I like are WeNatal, which is great because they're a new company actually, and they're looking at sperm health as well as part of the equation, which a lot of prenatals weren't doing for the longest time. We're starting to hear more and more about it, but men are 50% of the equation when it comes to any sort of infertility. So we have to give them something to help their sperm health. And they have a very nice men's prenatal supplement, and it goes with the women's. And the women's you can take on your fertility journey, and then through pregnancy. Their supplement has iron in it. So that's really good for any of my clients that are borderline low iron. We know we need that, and we want to get ahead of that before pregnancy because it could lead to, preterm labor, things like that. And we don't want that to happen. So getting your iron, getting your vitamin D, getting a high quality omega-3 supplement. That's going to be really good to start now. Two other brands that I like are Full Well and Needed. So
Yeah,
those are
Needed is great.
two other great options. But how I'm always vetting my supplements is I'm looking at dosage and I want to make sure it's high dose. And then I want to make sure they're using the proper forms of the vitamins and minerals you need. So, as you know, there's a difference between having folic acid and a methylated B vitamin.
Right.
So, we're always looking for the correct form and functional dosage.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things is, unfortunately, there's so many pills that they have to take. And it's like, I always say it like it's just part of the process because our soil is just so depleted. It's just impractical to get that out of food, what we really need.
That's true. I think that's why nowadays, not only has our diet, that's not as nutrient dense as our ancestors. If you look at what our ancestors were eating, they're eating nose to tail animals. They're getting you're getting so much more iron, you're getting so much more choline, all of those nutrients we know are needed for fetal development. When you look at something like liver, we don't really eat that anymore. And
I know, organ meat. Yeah.
We can talk about how to get it in. I love it personally for myself, but I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I can always make recommendations around that. But you're so right. Our modern day agriculture has stripped even broccoli, for example, is not going to have as much vitamin C as it used to. So we do need to supplement. Unfortunately, that is, I think, a smart thing to do, and it's definitely part of my recommendations. And the cool thing about Natal, that brand I was telling you about, is it's only 3 pills. So they've taken out any additive, anything that's making the count of pills larger and making it and condensing it and using some really cool technology to do that. So that's why I've been loving them, because it is a lot easier for compliance purposes to only have to take 3 pills.
Totally. And so here's another thing that I wanted to bring up is some of my patients are vegan. And Chinese medicine, we talk about how it is important to have animal protein. It is really hard to get certain nutrients with plant-based alone. So how do you approach that?
I've had vegetarian and vegan clients. I usually just present the science to them, and obviously I honor anyone's decision. Personally, I can't recommend a vegan diet for pregnancy. It's just too risky. You're at risk for a lot of nutrient deficiencies that we need during pregnancy. Vegetarians, they can do that during pregnancy.
They can still have eggs and get choline and, so vegetarians, yeah.
There's more room to play with a vegetarian if you're open to eggs, if you're open to dairy, if you're open to fish. Then we can really start to pull together a plan that starts to optimize your nutrient status. But my main goal is I want you to have optimal nutrient status going into pregnancy and at every trimester. And on a vegan diet, it is very almost impossible to do that. You're not able to, and you're going to be supplementing so much more, which is fine. But nature packaged food in a way that is very synergistic. So I do worry that it's not the same.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's just something that I've noticed and I've seen it in my office. It's not something, and I'm with you. I completely respect where people are coming from. And sometimes people are doing it for health. That's where it's a little easier, because if they just don't like the taste, they could do liver pills, and I work with them that way. But in terms of people wanting to do it because of belief, it's harder because
it does become really tricky.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen people getting really depleted.
Yeah, and it depends too on how long you've been living that lifestyle as well. I had a vegetarian that was vegetarian for 17 years before getting pregnant, and then all she craved during pregnancy was like a burger and oysters and all these things. That's like, this is ways your body communicates with you, which is really cool. And I always encourage women to really tap into that intuition and listen to what their body is telling them, because you know your body more than anybody else, more than your doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so you should listen to that. And if you don't feel something is right, listen to that instinct.
I believe in that so much. And when I moved to San Francisco in my early 20s, I think I was a vegan at one point and vegetarian for sure. And then my mom came to visit and she's like, "You are so pale. We're getting you a steak." And I was like, "What?" And then I was like, you know what? I didn't totally fight her because I felt like I really needed it. And it literally was like a watered plant, a plant that's been so dry, just all of a sudden watered. I came back to life. I had color in my skin. So it's funny how you know it, like something's missing in your body.
Yeah. And when you know the science too behind it, then you can start to maybe make modifications and justifications during pregnancy. And it doesn't have to do as much with I'm a bad person or my values. It's like, okay, we have a bigger why now. We're actually building a baby from scratch. That takes a ton of nutrients, a ton of energy. This is what the science is telling us. We can always go back to how we want to eat for whatever reason after pregnancy, but let's at least use the science that we have and respect that as well. But, you know, every woman and every pregnancy is so different. So
Totally.
whenever I work with clients, it really is a unique approach. And then I have a course that really does teach all the foundations of what I want people to start to think about before pregnancy, during pregnancy, how to stock the kitchen, and how to really make sure they're optimizing their nutrient status for brain health, metabolism, genetic expression, gut health, all these things that we're forming in utero.
Totally. And then one last thing that I wanted to talk about, which is so important, is vitamin D. It's huge.
Yes.
What's crazy is that we have people here in sunny Florida, that's where I am, and they're still deficient in vitamin D. And I think it has a lot to do with magnesium deficiency, which is kind of like this other component.
Yeah, it's so synergistic in that way. And that is one thing when I'm trying to put the pieces together for people. You do need to look at the full picture, and you need to look at magnesium and zinc and see, is there other deficiencies happening? Could that help correct vitamin D? And often it can. And vitamin D, you're right. I've been in Singapore the past 6 years. I grew up in California, but I've always been deficient in vitamin D without supplementation. So for me and my clients over there, it's shocking actually, because we are on the equator and we're still not getting enough vitamin D, but we're all covered in clothing or sunscreen, protecting our skin, working inside, and the sun is our best friend when it comes to vitamin D.
Yeah.
So many women, I find, we have to supplement just for maintenance. And a lot of times we need a higher dose to get them up to above that 40 nanograms per milliliter. That's where I want people thinking above 40. That's what we know from the research is going to be best going into pregnancy and then during pregnancy. For a lot of women, it's like 4,000 IU just for maintenance.
Right.
So it's definitely a test to get with your doctor and look at. And it's very important because it's a big risk factor in miscarriage, preterm labor.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unexplained infertility. There's always an explanation, but it's those subtleties that nobody ever checks.
There's always an explanation, and it's true. And you do want to, check off those boxes and make sure there's not like a blocked fallopian tube or there's endometriosis, something like that. But there could be more subtle things happening. And that's why I love blood work. And I love, even if the blood work is showing us something, it might point us, oh, maybe we need to dive deeper and look at the stool. Recently, I had my stool looked at, and actually, like going back, it was the blood work that kind of pointed us in that direction. And I had elevated thyroid antibodies, but all my other thyroid hormones were normal. And we're like, okay, why am I having an inflammatory response to my thyroid? And so we looked at the gut. I had really, really elevated levels of H. pylori. That was something that I'm like, we need to take care of that before pregnancy, because you could see how that could start to snowball into bigger thyroid issues. And thyroid is so important during pregnancy. So it's all about being preventative and just knowing your body. And then you can just take little steps to start to set yourself up for a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, this conversation was great. This was so informative. Love talking to you. I find functional medicine nutrition to be so interesting. I use it a lot with my patients, but I'm an acupuncturist, but I love speaking with functional medicine practitioners and nutritionists. And I think food is so important.
Absolutely. And I have to say, it goes hand in hand. I've referred out to so many acupuncturists, and I've had my own success with acupuncture as well. So I think it's combining the best of both worlds and bringing it all together for our patients and for our clients.
It definitely takes a village. Now, before we go, I'd love for you to share your links, how people can work with you, your programs.
Sure. Yeah. So the best place to start if you're looking for fertility is you can follow me on Hello Baby Nutrition on Instagram, but I also have a free fertility guide where I really dive into a lot of the nitty gritty on labs to ask your doctor for, nutrition tips, supplements to look at. So the supplements we were talking about, all those good things. And so I have a free fertility guide. You can totally download that. But if you're already pregnant or you're really just wanting to dive in deep, I do have a course that teaches you all about optimizing your nutrient status for pregnancy. But yeah, it's Hello Baby Nutrition on Instagram, and hellobalance.co is my website.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Katie. This was a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.